Welcome to Connected Conversations. I'm really grateful that you're here and sharing your time. If you like the conversation that you hear, please like it and share. I'm Emma from Unique Phoenix. I'm a soul coach, energy healer, wellbeing guide, and an unapologetic, curious soul. Connected Conversations is here to bring love, healing, and connection to our everyday lives through open and authentic conversations. Every single conversation, I'm privileged to interview women and men in our communities that are here being their authentic selves, sharing their unique talents with the world around them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we can get to know them and what they offer much better.
My name's Kate Borland and I'm a public health nutritionist. My work over 12 years spans across the alcohol and drug sector, and it's more about empowering people around the skills that they can attain in the process of change and creating really positive habitual routines that can impact their lives in recovery and their lifelong impact on their mental and physical well-being.
Hi, and welcome to Connected Conversations, which is here to bring love, healing, and connection through our everyday life through open and authentic conversations. Today, I'm particularly excited to be meeting and sharing time with Kate Borland. From what I've gathered of Kate, she is absolutely a nutrition and well-being education expert. As you've already been introduced, she works in a very specific field. However, the wealth and breadth of what you know, Kate, around that area is massive. And Kate shares her wisdom through cooking, the skills to do it, life skills, and the benefits that it brings to all areas of your life, mind, body, and soul. So, welcome, and thank you so much for sharing your beautiful energy and time with me. Your work, Kate, speaks to my soul because food awareness, nourishing your body, well-being habits have absolutely transformed my own mental health, over 15 years ago, as well as my physical health. And I've definitely been through childhood trauma, and then I absolutely abused my body through drugs and alcohol, and coming out the other side of that and repairing it has absolutely been amazing. And we've been connected through LinkedIn, which I love, and I love seeing your posts and what you share. So I want to dive in and get a bit technical first. I want to lay the foundation for everyone so they absolutely know we are in the best possible hands when it comes to your level of expertise, because your background and what you do is phenomenal. So tell us your background. Like, what is it that you're like? Because you've done some pretty amazing training, I've got to say, like just in terms of your technical background, that's phenomenal. Can you share that with us?
Well, it didn't happen overnight, and I think that's what's the most incredible thing about our life and what I bring to my work is that it's a journey and we create stories from that journey. So it's not about staying stuck in trauma or behaviours or addictions. It's about actually moving forward with positivity. And so at 17, I come from a family. My father was a very well-known architect, and so in my childhood there was 7 kids, and my mum was told after the 5th child that she shouldn't have any more children. And we went to a school that my dad helped design. It was a progressive private school, and it was pretty much a chaotic childhood. And then at 17, my mother passed away from a stroke. And so it threw more chaos onto the family. My younger brother and sister were 11 and 12. And I was out of home actually living with a sister studying art and design because my dad had been an architect. It was all about creativity really, and he always said that I'll support you as long while you're studying or while you're educating yourself. And so for me it was something that I wasn't good at school, and I especially was not interested in science and maths and chemistry and all these subjects that later on down the track I realised I had to have some sort of understanding or foundation into studying nutrition. And so I went off about my merry way. I ended up moving to Sydney, and I did modelling there for about 4 years, which was an incredible part of that story and that journey, because that's where a lot of sort of continued sort of partying behaviour happened in my life. And then I moved to England and I met this amazing woman that was a reflexologist, and her training was in Denmark. And in Denmark, alternative medicine is in actual fact as highly regarded as Western medicine. And so she'd studied for 6 years in a Danish hospital. That was part of her training. And she said, Kate, and I was seeing her at the time to give up smoking and just to sort of try and get a good balance in my life. And she said, I want you to go back to Australia and study nutrition or dietetics and then come back and work with me, because she knew that I was a very good cook. So that planted a seed. I then came back to Australia. I didn't get in. I was applying as a mature age student. At the time, the only course that was really available was at RMIT, and it was called a Bachelor of Applied Science. And it wasn't just nutrition. It had a lot of home economics involved. So there was a lot of community subjects. There was actually dressmaking and things that were totally not connected to nutrition. And I thought, well, I'll apply. And I didn't get in the first year, but they remembered me from the interview on the second year. So I got in on that second year, and it took me 9 years during that period of time. It was, I lost my father. So he got at least to see me, because it was so important that he saw his children, you know, going to university. He saw the beginning of that process, but he didn't see the end. But that's why I say now everything I do, like I have on my table here, a fruit bowl that was my mother's, you know, her beautiful bowl. And
I've got a fruit bowl on my dining table. Like, it's just, you know, like I've always got to have some kind of form of food out. For those that are listening on a podcast, like, you know, what have you got on this is what I used to think, what have you got on your dining table? Because I don't do centerpieces. I used to do pretty centerpieces. And then one day I just kind of had this moment where I thought, why would I do that? So now it's always got lemons and oranges and limes and apples and whatever it is. There's always something in there. So if someone says, I'm hungry, I point to the bowl and there you go. You can have something.
And it is, you know, you'll see here, I've actually got these 3 giant avocados. Well, when I was
massive.
In the 1970s, my mum, because my dad was an architect and it was all around design, so everything was sort of fashionable in a way. And avocados you could not really buy in Melbourne. She would make friends with fruiterers. We would go to the Paxenoses in Prahran, and then there was someone somewhere else, and they would order her avocados. And because she would do dinner parties all the time, and she would cut them in quarters, because there were 7 of us, and we'd have it with lemon and salt and pepper, and we'd get to have the avocado. So that's where this all really started. That is representative of my mother, because she was so ahead of the time in as far as nutrition and cooking went. So everything I do is because of her, really.
I love that. Well, I've got to say, I have a similar thing with my mum, although it's kind of from the opposite direction. My mum was a very basic cook. So it propelled myself and my brother to begin cooking at home, because what we were being presented with was, you know, like we kind of started to go to other people's places and recognize, Mum's not a really good cook. but always grateful that it was always vegetables. It was always fresh and it was always good quality stuff. But oh yeah, I didn't have an avocado until I was in my 20s, I don't think, and I remember having it for like a smashed avo or something. Or I think my friend gave me a chicken and avocado sandwich. And I remember eating it and thinking, where have you been all my life? Like, what how have I not experienced this? And so now my kids absolutely love them. But I love that. I love that your mum has given you such a foundation for food. And even though, so what were you doing? Like when you're over in London, what were you doing there? What were you working? What was the
So
work?
there I met, yeah, I did work. I actually ran I met this lovely person who was a pastry chef, and we went off travelling, and we lived in Morocco and Portugal, which gave me even more of an open sort of portal, I
Good.
suppose, to nutrition and culture. And we arrived in Portugal, we left London with £1,000 for the two of us. And if you can imagine that, we travelled around Morocco, eating what we wanted, staying where we wanted. It was so cheap in those days. And we arrived, we had enough money to get the ferry from Tangier over to Lagos, Faro in Portugal, because that was the dream, that we were going to go there and work. And we ended up at this little train station with this amazing old woman who picked us up and took us home. We had no money for our first night's accommodation, and we were too scared to say this to her. And she was beautiful. She lived in this immaculate palatial 2-story sort of mansion. And what happened, we used to think, so it was all tiled, and she would cook these sardines on this little barbecue outside, and we were thinking, how on earth can we pay for this? And as it happened, she never asked us for money, so it gave us time to go and get work. And I'd known of this restaurant in Sydney when I lived there in Paddington called Darcy's, and he was quite a well-known restaurateur at the time, and he'd moved to Portugal, and he had a restaurant near where this lady's house was. And so we went and introduced ourselves to him, and he gave us the job. Matthew, my partner, was he became not the pastry chef, but the chef, and I ran the bar. So we were running this restaurant for like a good 6 months before we went back to England and then came back to Australia. So it was, hospitality. So I've always been in those environments, but obviously, of course, that's also allowed me to see this sort of decadent side of life, which I really realised that we needed to do more around, helping people to understand that celebration did not have to include drugs and alcohol.
Yes. I haven't been a big drinker for a long time. My body rejects alcohol. So, but I'll be honest, I had to mourn that because that was so part of the culture, and particularly, in Australia as well. But I've got to tell you, like, I celebrate life so much more differently now than, and it's so much more joyful, and there's so much more depth to it because there's nothing, covering it over. Like, it's pure celebration. And that's, without, I know I'm not saying for people to drink or not drink, do what you like, but for me, I completely stopped drinking well over a year ago now, and that was it. I was just like, I don't drink more. So, which in Australia, that's an interesting thing as well, to say that you don't drink. But you're right. I don't know that we celebrate over food as much anymore. Do you think?
No, and Em, I'm 23 years sober. So I come from this real contradiction, which is an interesting one. So I talk about my father, who was very well known in architecture. My mum's grandfather invented Victoria Bitter. So he was one of the first brewery owners in Australia, and he owned the whole of the CUB building on Alexandra Parade. And in fact, his name was Aitken, and her father or her grand, it's all, but that Thomas Aitken is what's on, they now put it on the boxes, the VB boxes, and that was,
Oh, wow.
her father and the brother, her uncle took over the brewery. So this is where my connection to my work has so much meaning, because I've seen the destruction. It certainly was destruction in her family, and then it was destruction on my father's side. He came from a very poor North Melbourne family where they really battled just to make ends meet. And so that whole connection around alcohol, and so for me making a decision 23 years ago was, you know, it doesn't suit any purpose, I don't believe, not even in moderation in anyone's life. I mean, and that's why my work is so important, and especially over the last 2 years, the rise, you know, when I was growing up, you had the really cheap German wine that I remember Mum and Dad used to buy in these boxes, and we'd be, you know, stealing it behind their back. But alcohol, and even coffee, there weren't coffee shops. There might have been Pellegrini's, a few little coffee shops, and all these things now, you know, alcohol is used, because raising my kids, I saw very, you know, the prevalence of people that would use, let's come over and have a glass of wine. And so we've got all this whole mindset around that alcohol is actually a relaxant, where in actual fact it's not, it's a depressant, and it serves no nutritional purpose, even though we have a lot of, you know, people saying, oh, but red wine and there's resveratrol and this and that. And I'm like, no, you know, we don't. We really need to talk about it as a community and a society, and especially over the last 2 years when we've been encouraged to celebrate with donuts and glasses of beer. It's absolutely horrifying. I mean, where is the public health message in that, when you're seeing, from my perspective, in the detox units, it's not the people we expect that will necessarily end out in there, oh, you know, they're poor, they come from this socio-economic background, you know, they don't work. Alcohol has really taken a hold over the last 2 years. It is very frightening to see. And, you know, because I shop on my way to work, I often will shop in Aldi, and they're not allowed to sell alcohol until 9 a.m. And I was seeing women over the last 2 years, young 30-something-year-old women, in the queue in front of me being told, oh no, sorry, you're going to have to come back later, it's before 9 a.m. Now, that just was speaking volumes to me. So, yeah.
Oh, look, and I 100%, I'm not shy about saying that it absolutely shocked me. And I'm all for people having jobs, and absolutely. But what really shocked me was when we're talking about being in a health crisis around the world, that things like, you know, the fast food, and I make no apology for talking about fast food outlets being poisonous. It's not food, it's not good for you. There's no nourishment in it. I don't care if you slap a bit of lettuce in there or give me a nutritional label on there that tells me that there's no nutritional value in most of this. But to see that those places were open, and also bottle shops were open, it absolutely shocked me. And look, I knew lots and lots of people that was, and you know, as we're talking about alcohol and drug abuse, you know, I've followed this for a long time, and I know from my own personal story, it's a numbing agent and it's a depressant, but it helps you think that you can forget, and it helps you believe that you'll get to the other side of this binge or this drink or this whatever, and it's okay because you can ignore the emotion that came up. I mean, that's one of my areas of expertise, is around allowing people and providing them the tools, the skills, the space to feel their emotions, because and you would know a lot of the reason that people turn to drugs and alcohol is trauma, because they can't deal with the trauma, and you're not actually emotionally meant to deal with the trauma as a child, but having no facility and having no support, you know, as you move away from it, and you know, you come out and you've got behavioral problems and you're saying, I've actually experienced something, getting support in that is crucial in those moments. And when you don't get it, I guarantee you, and I feel like you're going to be like, this is what I see, you will, as soon as you come of age and can drink and can have access to it, you will turn to drugs and alcohol because you don't know how to deal with the trauma. And you also don't want to deal with it either. And about you, but the past 2 years have been enormously traumatic on such different levels for so many people. But I know heaps of people that would come to me and say, I'm drinking so much more than I ever did before, but I can't deal with what's going on in the outside world. And this is the only way that I can deal with it is to drink. So, helping them move through that has, been really beautiful in my experience to help them see you're actually in a traumatic situation. And how about we deal with the emotions that are coming up? It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel shame. It's okay to feel all of that. But when we try and ignore it, and that's the work that you do in particular. But to me, I'm absolutely, there's no no hiding the fact that if this was about health, I don't know why we weren't talking about nutrition and what we're putting into our bodies. And, you can't, but I've got a 2 litre bottle in front of me that I drink from every single day. And it gets finished every single day. And I probably fill it up a little bit more because water is nourishment for our bodies. And I know, and I'm like, I know I'm saying it to you, but for the people out there listening and watching, drink more water. I can't even drink more water.
More water.
But you would have seen that, and you're right. It's not the people that you expect. Like I'm talking about, these are women that are highly professional, men that are in professional areas that would be drinking a bottle of wine a night or having a 6-pack, and not even because they're not coping and they don't know how to cope. And that's, you've got a beautiful organization that you're involved with and you help people do that. But you would have to admit, like support for people and what's out there is not as much as we actually need in the world.
No. And, for me, the thing is, and that comes back when we talk about feeling. So, and I say this because a lot of my best work, a lot of the work I love really doing is with males. And the reason that is because I encourage them to. Now, as women, it's much easier for us to pick up the phone and we share what we're going through. And if we bring this back to nutrition, food is how we feel. If we really want to concentrate on how we feel. So my years of nutrition expertise has taught me that if we start using drugs or alcohol in our teen years, irrespective of the trauma, a lot of the time it's got to do with our self-esteem and how we feel about ourselves. So we either want to lose weight, put on weight, we're not happy with our arms, we're not happy with our feet, we're not happy with our hair, I've got this. And then you start to basically, that dictates, that becomes the foundation of how we eat food or how we enjoy food. And when you explain to people that you can eat, realistically what you want, if you exercise and if you're eating the right food at the right times of day, then you are going to feel better. So I say to people, okay, so have your McDonald's hamburger. How do you feel half an hour later, an hour later? The second hour dictates if that food has had a positive or a negative impact on your soul and your well-being. Now, a lot of people think, I've worked with a lot of young boys who have told me, well, I've worked with a lot of people that tell me they don't even want to eat food because they don't want to go to the toilet. Now, we know in childhood that a lot of kids are too scared. When they start going to school, they don't want to go and do wee, or so they hold all day, so therefore they don't eat their school lunch. Like, this is so common, Emma, you have no idea. We've got people they don't want to do food. Yeah, it's amazing how many sort of idiosyncrasies we adapt and we hold in. Now, the whole thing about not going to the toilet is about not letting go. It's about being retentive. It's about holding everything in and controlling it. So therefore, if you're not eating, you're not going to need to go to the toilet. You don't like, but at the same time, you're going to, you know, the poisons are going to accumulate. We're going to reabsorb those poisons into our system. We're going to become very sick as a result. But this is where people's headspace takes them in around their food. If they're eating something like McDonald's that's got no fibre whatsoever, or fish and chips or Chinese food, you know, I meet people that think, oh, it's Thai food or it's Chinese food, so therefore it's vegetables, there's a lot of vegetables, so it's actually going to be good for them. And it's like, actually, no. What did they put in that food? Do you know what oil they used? Why don't we actually learn how to cook that ourselves? If we love, and you know, the menu at the adult detox unit, my beautiful boss, Rose, who saw they were given money. So I've worked there for about 10 years. And she said, why don't we get you to write the whole menu? And so we design it, you design it, and we'll have it. That's what we'll use as the menu. Now, that menu is a 7 day, so it's not a 10 day. So it is 7 days, which is good. But we're talking things like breakfast, they make themselves. So there's the things, the bread that I have, the brand of bread that I recommend that they use. There's things like Wheaties, which has no sugar. There's muesli, there's porridge, there's eggs. Then for lunch, it's things like homemade dips. So these are dips they have to make themselves. So they're learning how to not only cook their food, so all the food on the menu is cooked not by an external company like Spotlight or whoever. It's not cooked by the staff, it's cooked by the people in there that are some days feeling so sick they don't even want to get out of bed, but it's giving them purpose and reason to be motivated to get up. Now, within reason, the first few days they don't have to engage in those activities, but then they do after. So homemade dips, soups, lentil soup, minestrone soup, salads. For dinner, we've got things like homemade hamburgers, but it's got grated carrot, grated zucchini, fresh corn, fresh garlic. We've got, you know, wholemeal buns with tomato and lettuce and cucumber. We've got, you know, a sweet potato pie, which is just lentils with onion, carrots, tomato, garlic, and then we just smashed sweet potato with a bit of nutmeg, no butter in the sweet potato. That is on the top of the lentil mix with some cheese on the top. Now, I'm not a big one for the cheese necessarily, but it's a good way to get people to eat vegetarian food and to concentrate on the fibre content and also the vitamins and minerals that are going to rebuild their brain function in a period in which they've really, they've got no energy, they're not feeling able to even cope with what they're going through. And so part of that has meant, you know, and that's been now implemented for 5 years. Like we haven't changed it. And then I go in there on every second week and I'll give a talk, and people might be sitting there saying, there's not enough meat. And there is. Look, there's a chicken pasta bake, there's hamburgers, there's a roast one night, there's a chicken salad. But what we've done is we've spread it out. So it's like, might be vegetarian and then chicken, vegetarian fish, vegetarian red meat. So it's like you're getting this really good spectrum of nutrients, not concentrated in one area. And they'll say, oh, but, you know, there's not enough meat. And I say, but how are you feeling? Well, actually, I'm going to the toilet every day, or I'm going to the toilet twice a day. And we know, well, we know from alcohol and drug use, depending on what it is, alcohol gives us diarrhea. We actually don't have enough time to absorb the nutrients. No matter how good the food we are eating, what goes in comes straight out. So we don't have time. And long-term alcohol use, the impact on our brain is something called Korsakoff-Wernicke syndrome. Now, I could give it the really horrible name, which is, I'm not even going to say it, but there is a really horrible name. It's almost like brain damage. It's like early onset dementia. And we have a lot of people in nursing homes to this day that have this as a result of their alcohol use. A lot of malnourishment, you know, like I've worked with men that are 30 kilos, and I say to them, we just need to get you, and they will. When we love people, I mean, it makes me feel so emotional when I think about it. When we love and care about people and they know we're not being fake, and this is what gets me so angry about most government measures, it's fake. They do not care about people's well-being. We need to start connecting with people from here and into the future, not just providing this victim status that they're just going to go round and round in circles for the rest of their life, trying to access services, getting disappointed. You know, I've once had someone, but, you know, I meet people often in the youth unit, and then I might meet them, you know, in the adult unit 5 years later, and they'll be like, Kate, are we making that juice today? Can we make that cake? Or, oh, I'm still eating sushi. And these, or, oh, the big one, I eat avocado every day. Now, I'm not cross at them because they're back in the detox unit. I'm just happy that I, at least in my small capacity, had some sort of positive impact on their lives. And I think this is where I'm really worried about the future. And I'm now saying this on LinkedIn. We need to talk about nutrition. We need, you know, recently I had the head of Dietitians Australia contact me because I challenged him. He actually made a comparison between what we spend on meals in prison and what we spend in aged care. Now, obviously, we need his $10 for prisons and $6 in aged care. And I'm like, excuse me, that...
Why is there a difference?
It's a big difference, but to be putting people... I said, everybody deserves access to sound nutrition. Everybody. But now,
well, and that's the problem when we monetize it,
yeah.
Right? That's the problem when we go, let's put a cost on, oh, look, I'm all for growing your own food, teaching kids how to do that. My kids die all the time and are devastated by the fact that I make them cook things from scratch.
Yeah.
If you want biscuits, we know how to make them. I was brought up and raised that way. Yeah, I love what you're talking about. There's a couple of things that I wanted to just go back to for a second, if that's okay. One of them, you talked about insecurities, and I 100% agree with you, particularly in teen years. It's already a confusing time enough, isn't it? Because your body is going through a substantial amount of change. I mean, let's not even talk about the brain development that goes on in, you know, those years from like 12 to 25. Holy wowzers, that's your brain is completely almost rewiring itself to become like a fully fledged adult brain, where you've got this very different cognitive level. It's a very confusing time. And yet all this stuff that's coming at kids and all this information, you know, our insecurities really come from outside experiences and outside sources telling us we've got to look a particular way. You know, your skin's got to be this, your hair's got to be this, you've got to wear this, you've got to, you know, and if you sit outside of that, you know, can't watch certain things, you're weird if you do this. And if we sit outside of that, of course you're going to have a massive amount of insecurities, but you're going to have them anyway if you're trying to fit in and it's not you as it is. I loved what you talked about there. I think it's a really important point to make and to get people clear that if you are experiencing these things in your life, you're right, you don't have to have had a traumatic experience. It can simply be the messaging that's come at you, and just to be taking a look at what that is. Because someone's given you this idea that you're not whole and perfect and beautiful and divine and amazing just as you are, and feeding your soul with nourishing food. I also wanted to talk about the toilet thing, because that psychologically is like, when I really learned that as a parent, what that meant, that actually children, like toddlers, didn't know that their poo and wee were not part of them. So when you take the nappy off, they think they're losing a part of themselves, right? So when I learned that, it completely shifted how I did, toilet training, like moving my kids and helping them grow into, being able to take responsibility for going to the toilet. Ah, but you know what? I had another thought when you were saying it, right? And I love this because, I know a lot of women. I know a lot of women that don't like going to the toilet because they don't want people to hear them. And so
Yeah.
they'll put toilet paper in the bottom so people don't hear the splash and just in case they make a noise, they might fart, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, and because I don't want people to hear them. And when you were talking about the fact that that's actually psychologically because they're not wanting to let go, it just made me look at it in a really new viewpoint. So thank you very much for giving me that. But if you don't want people to hear you when you go to the toilet, are you not wanting people to see you when you're needing to let go of something? When you're moving through something, when you're in either pain or you're in sadness, or is that happens? Do our bodies kind of shut down if we shut down and disconnect? Is that because
Yeah.
that sounds like it's a very psychological, like there's a connection there. And I have absolutely never thought about that before. And
Yeah.
I'm mind blown. At the moment, my mind's like, that's new information. I'm excited to learn because
Mhm.
is it that our body starts to, because this is me, my area is I help clients understand we feel before we think. So our bodies will have a response to what's going on around us. We'll feel it, and then our brain starts to go, I've got a story for you. Let me tell you how this is the same as what's happened before, even though it's a different situation. And so then our body goes, oh, okay, maybe you're right. Yeah, that's how I feel. And the feeling can get bigger or it can dissipate depending on the memory that comes up. So then there is a psychological, and I'm not saying there is a psychological connection between that. So can our brains then, like if we're not wanting to let go of something, are you saying that our brains can shut down our bowels?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And, and it becomes very conscious. And so I'll give you an example, which has actually just happened yesterday. I went to visit a friend. So we're all women in our late 50s, and she lives in a house, and her bathroom was set up because she cared for her elderly mother. Anyway, I said, oh, where's the toilet? Anyway, in there. And they were sitting close, and you couldn't shut the door. She had stuff, so you couldn't shut the door, and it was really weird. And I said, so I don't shut the door. And I normally don't shut the door anyway. I just live with my kids. It's not a big deal. Anyway, and it was really weird. I had that conscious thought, they're going to hear me going to the toilet. But I didn't care because we were all, women, best friends. But it is really amazing. Like even people meeting them in the detox unit, and obviously there's private toilets, but there's communal, there's not en suites in all of the rooms. I don't know, I'm pretty sure there's not. But that whole feeling, and this is where disease starts to happen, because a lot of people that have used drugs for a lot of years will then, and alcohol, there's all these other things like Crohn's disease, and not necessarily as a result of not going to the toilet, it's an autoimmune disease, but there's things like hemorrhoids and once, the most famously, when I was in there, so I often use, I'm just trying to think where I put it.
We're going to have to describe it as well, Kate, because this is also a podcast,
I'm going to
as visual as we can get, but we need to,
I'm going to show you just really quickly. So this is psyllium. So fibre basically fills up our stomach.
Yes.
And it collects the poison, works like a magnet. And I show people, so my work isn't just about sitting there lecturing them. I like to have it as being an interactive experience. And I asked them one day, so I go in, there's this big table where everyone sits. It's a 16-bed unit. And they all sit over there, and I said, do we know what fibre is? Now, I remember from myself, and I remember from my daughter, that she never asked questions, because she did once ask a question and the teacher really put her down, and that stemmed many years of learning difficulties for her. She's still, to this day, at 18 years old, scared to ask a question and scared to stand up for herself. So I say to people, whatever you're going to ask me, there's no right or wrong answer. This is about learning. So I really try and encourage them that I want you to ask questions. If I'm talking about antioxidants or I'm talking about fibre, I expect you to say, or to stop me, or to have questions about that. So I said, do we know what fibre is? And then they all sort of sit there silently. And then this one boy chirped up, oh, I sort of do, but, you know, no, I don't. Anyway, I gave the spiel, I did the demonstration, which swells in the water. We put it in a glass of water, we stir it, and it goes like jelly. So it's a bit like Metamucil, but Metamucil's got colour, flavour and additives. This is just it's just a natural husk from a plant. It's the main ingredient in Metamucil, but it's got none of that other junk. If I go to a doctor, he's going to tell me to get Metamucil that's going to cost $30 a tube. This costs me $5 or $6, and it's got none of the sugar or additives. So I tell people buy this. But anyway, then at the end, I gave the spiel, and then someone else said,
sorry, Kate, can you just, what's that product called? Can you just tell us what that is, just for people listening? So it's organic psyllium husk. And you've got an organic one, but it's true dietary fibre. That's what you're looking for, people. So you'll probably get that from a health food shop if you're looking out for it.
Or any health food shop. It's in the supermarket, just depending on what brand. It's in the health food shop aisle. Anyway, this person just all of a sudden said, God, I'm glad he asked that question, because I didn't know what it was and I was too scared to say. Yeah. So, and that's why I say to people, what you might ask might then help everybody else, but they've not been able to actually ask those questions. And the thing when it comes to nutrition, then I've had a chap that actually, that was his job for the Cancer Foundation, actually talking about fibre. And he was like, oh my God, I've been trying to educate people and I didn't even know what you've just told me. That was my job, and how you explain it makes it so easy and it makes so much sense. So my thing is with the whole nutrition is I don't want it to be scientific. It's got to be simple. And that's why I say to people, how does the food make you feel? And I think something really important to touch on, we now do not talk about weight. And then when we get back to this whole issue around self-esteem and those teen years, we know that we can either deny ourselves of nutrients or we can overdo it with the nutrients. But we're now living in a world where being overweight is okay. And it's actually not okay. Physically, It is not okay. And they say if we lay these foundations down in our youth, like in our primary years, which is happening a lot, like you will see it, and that is only because the kids are eating the wrong foods, then they're setting themselves up for a lifelong struggle with their weight. Now, being overweight means we're carrying fat around our organs. We get what's called fatty liver. We get demotivated. But guess what? The most important thing is we don't like ourselves. Like, I work with a whole lot of people who say to me they want to be really staunch. No one can tell me that, I'm not well or I'm not this, and they become really sort of like gung-ho that this is my choice, I'm happy being this weight, and bad luck to everybody else. And I
call bullshit on that. I call bullshit on it. You're trying to tell yourself, and look, I know it's probably controversial, but I'm with you on that. I grew up with a very overweight mother and a very obese mother, and so that propelled me into looking after myself. So I'm lucky I didn't go the other way, but it also propelled me to look after myself, not necessarily in the best possible way. I was probably eating a lot less than was good for me.
Yeah.
So, you know, those little ideas in my head still come up, you know, and I have to be aware that I've got this little brain coding going on that says, oh, you know, like you can't be overweight, as in even a tiny little bit. So I have gone to extremes in my looking after myself. But I love that, Kate. Thank you for saying it, because we've almost gotten to a point in our world where we're so fucking sensitive about this. That, and mind you, everyone comes in different shapes and sizes. I talk about health, you know,
Yeah.
and if you're not feeling good about your body, and if you're trying to pretend that you are, because for some people, being in their body shape, I mean, I know women that have got beautiful, like really wide shoulders and, you know, full hip, like wide hips. So then their shape is going to look completely different to mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And someone might look at them and go, they're overweight. But at the same time, you're like, well, hang on, they actually work out, they look after their bodies. That's
Yeah.
actually their body shape, right?
Yeah.
That's actually, so we have to get a bit clearer on that as well. But I agree with you. And I love that we've gotten so sensitive. You can't say to someone, imagine, because in the current circumstances that we're in, you can comment on one particular health choice, but if you've got a morbidly or even an obese or overweight person sitting in a terrible fast food place, you can't walk up to them and go, what are you doing? That's
No.
really bad for you. And how dare you? Because you're putting a strain on my hospitals.
Yeah.
You're putting a strain on the health system because you refuse to look after yourself and eat well. But you can't do that. You
No.
can't say those things. But I love that you're saying it, because it's true. If you are, and this is my understanding, you'll help me out here. If you are 10 to 15 kilos over where you need to be in your body, what the best weight your body can support, you are putting a strain on yourself. You're putting a mental strain on yourself, an emotional strain on yourself, but also you're putting in a mental, emotional, and physical strain on every single person around you. Because
Mm.
every single person is going to feel compelled to prop you up. Oh, don't worry about it. You look fabulous. I
Yeah.
don't do that. I've
No.
got friends that over the years, and some of them are not my friends anymore, when they've said, I'm okay being this way. And I said, so, but you feel tired, you don't feel good, you really don't like your body, you've got to dress a particular way because you've got to cover parts of your body that you don't like, but you're okay with your weight.
Yeah.
So I love that you're saying it. Not everyone's going to be a tiny little skinny mini. However, if you are exercising and you are looking after yourself, and I also, because I come from, you know, the emotional point of view as well, if you're feeling good emotionally, then your body's going to respond to that.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying. How does your body make you feel? I mean, if everyone listening and watching can ask themselves that question, how does the food you're eating make you feel? And you said 2 hours. That's so interesting to me, because that's me on a nutshell. Like, if I eat something that doesn't agree with me, because I'm gluten and dairy free now, I had so much inflammation that I had to go down that path, and I love it now. I'll be honest, I still miss bread, but I can tell you within that 2 hour time, I know I love it, I do love bread, I just have to find good sources of it. But when you're in that 2 hour time frame, you feel it. And I can wake up the next day and go, oh dear, that wasn't okay for me. You know, I'm a huge chocolate and ice cream fan, but that's not an all the time food for me. And it's not,
No.
I don't look at it like a treat. I look at it like that's actually something that I enjoy eating, but it's not an all the time eating food. That's
Yeah.
every now and again food, not even a weekly food. But I love that. Ask yourself, how does your food make you feel?
And I think, Emma, the thing is with that, so I'm vegan. My son is vegan, my daughter is not. But I'm a flexitarian vegan. I do have honey. Now, on a strict vegan diet, you won't. I will, if I was invited to someone's house and they had a beautiful fish curry, I'd probably eat the fish curry. I think that, you know, we create lots of barriers, and wheat is the thing I can only eat at night. And I say to people, if I had my way, we would have people would not be eating bread. I am sorry. It totally exhausts us. It weighs us down. It's one of those carbohydrates that doesn't really serve a purpose. We use it like pasta and bread because it's a staple and it's cheap and we think that we're eating something. And so for me, I don't even eat 3 meals a day. I don't need to at my age. Like, I eat when I'm hungry. So I let my body guide me. But at the same time, I do understand, and like, it is really difficult because with my work for people in recovery, especially with alcohol, it's really important we ground ourselves. So grounding ourselves means putting something in our stomach, because if you know anything about 12-step programs, which is, I encourage people to go to 12-step programs. I say to them, do whatever you can that supports you in your journey of recovery. Now, if that's a 12-step program, they've got a famous saying, I think it's like, don't never get too tired, too cold and too hungry. So it's about like, but a lot of the time what people do is they give up one thing and then overdo another. So they'll give up the alcohol and they start becoming a comfort eater because they're not dealing with those underlying things that are actually, that are the band-aids that help with our trauma in the first place. And you and I both know there's no end to the trauma. It's about management. It's about learning to live with it. It's about accepting it, and it's about integrating it into our soul. It's not something that we need to fear. It's not something we need to be ashamed of. It's not something that we need to say never existed. And that's why I go into my work, I say, this is me. Whatever you've done, I've probably done it too. You don't need to know the details, but you need to know I don't do it now and I haven't done it for a number of years. And it's the same with the food. There's times where I want to eat bread or ice cream or chocolate, but I can choose, and I use this as a really good example. I used to love Tim Tams, great Tim Tams. Now, if I was to have chocolate, my go-to chocolate would be pineapple chocolate. Like, I love it. The sweeter or strawberry, the better. Now, in all those years that they've got Tim Tams in all the different flavours of the rainbow, not once have I ever bought a packet of pineapple Tim Tams at $1 a packet, because we remember that all this food, the junk food, the food that's available, is always on sale. So you can go to the supermarket at the end of the day and buy a cheesecake for $1. Now, psychologically, we think it's $1, we can afford that, but we get that. We eat it in one sitting because it's not going to last. And so we have that big cheesecake or the Lamington cake or whatever it is, because we've all got this budget mindset as well around food now, because food's quite expensive. But so for me, I've never bought the pineapple or the Black Forest Tim Tams, because I know if I do, it's going to make me far more likely to buy them next time. So it's one of those things, like temptation is really good for us to learn to live with, but not necessarily indulge in, that type of thing, because it just doesn't support my mental health. It doesn't support how I'm going to feel about tomorrow. It's got no nutrition, all these things like pineapple flavoured, strawberry flavoured, chocolate flavoured. They're all additives, they're all things that are not natural and not needed. So it's about really training ourselves, and this is what it's the same with giving up alcohol and drugs. We need to train ourselves into positive rituals that actually support all these things. And that's what I really try and encourage people to do. Unless you start, you're never going to start.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, I do things like I love chocolate, and I've found very good sources of chocolate. But being that I'm dairy free now, it's a bit more challenging for me. So
Ah,
I found, yeah, so I found recipes of like, like organic food going into it. They're like little chalk balls, and because I make my own peanut butter and all that kind of stuff,
yeah,
um, and oh my God, like that to me, because they're so rich, they've got dates and all that beautiful stuff, are amazing. But that to me is like a little sweetness, like instead of having like a piece of fruit, sometimes I go, oh, I'll have a couple of these. They've got like dates and everything in them, but they're beautiful. And the fact that I make them, well, that's been huge for my mental health, the making of food, because it's almost like this act. Well, no, it's not almost, it is. It's an act of love to myself.
yeah,
When I'm making good food, I'm appreciating what's going into my body. And, I encourage that with clients as well. Have a think about, and you mentioned something before that you did earlier, which is meal planning. You could have like the 7 day. I've got a thing on my fridge, which the kids and I will write down what we're going to cook this
yeah,
week, what we're going to make. And so they know what they're getting for dinner. They've got an idea about what's going on, but it just has made that was huge to me way back when I was, stepping towards, understanding my mental health and where it came from, and then how do I nourish my body, and just that simple action of knowing what I was going to be eating and having that planned so that I didn't, on days when I couldn't think about it, like literally couldn't fathom even thinking about deciding that kind of stuff, I'd already decided it.
yeah,
Like it was done. And it just, oh, I'm having, chicken curry tonight, or I'm having spaghetti bolognese, whatever it is.
yeah,
Um, so I want to know then, because I think that is that just that, how does your food make you feel? That has to be, that's been actually, I've learned that today. So thank you. That's been a big aha moment for me. And I also think is a great question for teens, just to, as they're moving into a level of wanting to be more responsible for themselves and learning what that is, asking them, what does the food do to you? How do you feel after it? What a great level of body awareness to give someone. That's a great gift, Kate.
yeah.
I love that question. Enormous. So I want to ask you then, what are some tips around finding healthy food? Because you're right, you have to retrain the brain. I have had to. I've had to retrain the brain because I go to someone that has their own business with fruit and veg and that gets delivered to me every week. I know where they get it from. I know the local growers because she shares it all.
Yeah.
Um, and she is passionate about where she gets her food from as opposed to going to the local supermarket. But what are some of the tips if that's your only opportunity, like it's where you're at and you've got to go to the supermarket to get your fruit and veg? And let's face it, there are pesticides on them. Some of them are genetically modified um, to not go off as quick into all that kind of stuff. What would be some of your tips around finding healthy food? What would you encourage people to do?
Even in shopping centres where there's supermarkets, there's usually a fruit and vegetable or a meat outlet.
Hmm.
Now, I do buy, like I got these avocados in the supermarket, but I bought them when they weren't ripe and they were $1.50. One thing I usually do buy at supermarkets are avocados, but I buy most of my stuff. I personally, the one thing that I can afford, like that I spend I lash out on, is organic when I can.
Mm.
And I will always look in the toss out or the food that's been marked down. So we can actually have access to good food if you're looking at the right place. Now, IGAs, which is Independent Grocer Association, they usually have better quality, or direct from a fruit and veg. I've got a fruit and veg man that's been a fruiterer for 40 years. He's lovely and he knows. He'll say to me, oh, I got these apples in, or they're Hillsville strawberries. So I'll say to him, Vinny, what are these like? I think developing relationships with the people we buy food from is very important. Now, even I've got relationships with the people at the supermarket, so I'm not saying you can't have those relationships, but the quality, and 100% guaranteed, it's usually more expensive. So the other day at the supermarket, cauliflowers, I think, were $7.90, and they were $5 in Aldi. Aldi is usually a reasonable, you know, access point for people to buy food. You've also got things like, if you're eating fish, I now buy, and I'll just show you this because it's quite important.
I'll describe it for people listening. Don't you worry about that. Kate, I love that you're saying that just while you grab it, developing relationships with the people you get your food from. I do this naturally. So the woman that I get my fruit and veg from is an organic woman. Like, that's where she's sourcing it from. But the other thing I did want to sort of just pop it, if you are buying your fruit and veg from the supermarket, when you get it home, fill your sink up with cold water and pour in there a cup, like depending on how big the sink is. If it's a massive sink, 2 cups, but a cup of white vinegar. It doesn't have to be anything special. And what that will do is it'll actually dissolve any kind of dirt, pesticides that are still sitting on the outside of it, anything like that. Will take it off, so you'll find that your fruit and veg actually, 1, does last a little bit longer, but 2, tastes a little bit better because you haven't got a film over it. And you'll particularly notice that with apples, because they get almost like a plasticky film, and you take that off and it is absolutely magic. But I agree with you, keep relationships. It's the same as, you know, look, I go from vegan, vegetarian to my diet is based on, as you said before, having that physical awareness of what do I feel like right now? What do I need? And so I will eat in that way. And I'm like you, I don't often eat, you know, quite often I might not eat all day if my body hasn't said I'm hungry. And then I get to dinner and go, oh, I'm hungry now. Like I eat for my body and how it feels. But I love that. Develop the relationships, because then your butcher gets to know you. You know, the fruit and veg people get to know you, and they know what you like. Hey, your kids loved mangoes last time. I've just got some here, but you know, and they're this much. Because for me, at first I looked at it like a sacrifice with food, in terms of it does cost more to eat that way. But it's, you know, but then I also looked at, and I often have a look at clients and say, what's the sacrifice on the other end of it? If you're not eating good quality food, your body is going to respond to that. And then you're going to be dealing with health issues on the other side: inflammation, poor gut health, you know, tiredness, mental health issues. So what are you willing to sacrifice? A little bit of money or your health?
Yeah. And, you know,
Really,
it doesn't cost a lot of money necessarily. So
not when you're cooking for yourself, not when you choose to, you know, actually cook food. Yeah.
And, you know, and I think, so for me, like last week I did, so I've just recently doing a pilot program for the Magistrates Court, which is it's called Drug Court. And they get given a $20 card that they can go and access. So I have to do, I price it all according to Coles online or whatever, which I've never done in my life. But so what we did last week was we did salmon. So I just now access salmon like this, which comes in a pack of 2, and it's from the supermarket. Now, this is deep sea salmon. So it's Atlantic salmon that comes from the ocean, whereas a lot of the fresh salmon we get now here in Australia, it's all farmed. And when it's farmed, they're actually putting, now that costs $6.40, I think, for the packet of 2. So that's $3.20 per serve. Then all we did was we got a bag of stir-fry vegetables, which cost $3. Now that was enough to suit for 2 serves. So basically you've got $9. It costs like $4, I think, per serve, which is not a lot. Like, I don't know what Centrelink prices are now for food, but, and even you could even source it. When I go into the detox unit, I always usually cook salmon, and I buy fresh salmon from a fishmonger, and I get the tails and we cut it into thin slices, because you've got to remember, you don't need portion sizes like this, a big piece of fish. We just cut thin little strips, and then we have heaps of vegetables around the plate. Then we might have avocado and mango salsa. So also shopping for food when it's in season. And the thing about developing these relationships, my fruiterer, because he knows what I do, he's always sending me away with things. Have a box, these mangoes, juice them, or whatever, you know, or take a piece of watermelon. So it's always about that type of thing that, you know, I say to people, if you are on a low income, go and buy one zucchini, one carrot. You don't need to buy a whole lot. Also, how we can fill in the time is we can think on the day, what do we want to cook? Then we can spend the time, we can fill it in, we can research a recipe, we can go and shop for the ingredients, then we can actually cook the ingredients. So we make it into this sort of, you know, a bit like theatre or something, that we can actually create this environment in which our brain is not overthinking, you know, I'm not feeling good, I've got no energy, because everything in life, when you get to my age, you realise is about distraction, like, and getting to the next moment. So what you feel now is not what you're going to be feeling in 10 minutes or half an hour or an hour. So it's the same with how we feel. Like, I know there are times that I want to sit in bed and eat ice cream or chocolate or whatever. Most of us, and I think especially now heading into the future, a lot of us are going to be looking for external comforts because they do work. But I think for me, that's where the nutrition and the exercise has to be the number one foundation. And I haven't even talked about exercise yet, but I'm always encouraging people, whether it's walking or cycling, doing something simple. We need to move the oxygen around our body, and we need to get oxygen into our brain, which is why the lockdowns have been so difficult. I mean, we weren't barely allowed outside. If we're not getting oxygen up here, then we're not letting in fresh air. We're not breathing fresh air into our whole psyche. And so therefore we're much more inclined to just want to sit around, slumped over, lying in bed, doing all this, rather than sort of sitting up straight and thinking, okay, what can I achieve today? What can I eat that's going to be good for me? And how can I move my body? And that's simple.
Preach. Yeah.
It's simple. And, you know, and a lot of people don't, whether we do this for our kids by guiding them, whether my mum did it for me with the avocados, which she definitely did. I try and start with people right back at the beginning. And you've got to remember, Emma, that what we say, me saying this to someone is different than a parent lecturing us. You know, my kids relate differently to me than how the people I work with relate. You know, they look at me, oh, wow, you know, this we really want to hear. But over 12 years, I think there's only been once and that was quite an elderly chap who was in the detox unit, and he was like, oh no, I can't eat this, or he had a problem with it. And that's usually people are so open because they just want to be part of this experience. And that's another beautiful thing about the detox unit. My boss did not buy a dishwasher. Because people need to stand and do the dishes, and that's where the conversation happens. So like when we're eating food, we eat as a community. We need to bring back community and that communal enjoyment of what we share. We're all now so greedy as human beings. We need to own more than one house. We need to have more than one friend. We need to eat more than one type of food. We've become so, you know, it's like sensory overload, and therefore we've become so greedy that there's not enough to share around. And that's where I get really upset with where we're headed in the future, because to me it's all about what we can share together and what we can create. That's where I think the big problem has become. That's why people are locked inside. They're not eating well. They're using drugs. They're using alcohol. you know, the whole trauma thing, because you've got to remember, Emma, we've got a lot of kids now that didn't go through the same things. It's not necessarily, you know, sexual abuse or domestic violence or, you know, being bullied at school. We've got so many now extra external factors that we really have to be leaders. You have to be a leader. I have to be a leader, because I've been through so much that journey has created this, the here and now. And, you know, with all these stories that we can share, and if we share our vulnerabilities, it's more inclined for other people to open up and to realise, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. I can share my vulnerability. And that's why I love what you do, because, and I love what I do, because I know even other staff have learnt so much from me, because it's about, I've had sometimes people have said, oh, you know, you're not really allowed to say that. And I'm like, if I didn't say that, people wouldn't believe what I'm trying to get them to do in their own life.
I love everything that you've said, and I 100% support it as well. And I agree. As you were saying, and I thought, and this is why you and I are here, Kate, because from our different aspects of well-being, we are here to help people grow into it and to look at their lives in such, and to connect. I mean, connection is huge for me. I mean, that's actually it's a basic human need, is to connect. And I love it. I love what you said. I've taken notes because I wanted just to sort of break that down a little bit. And so I love what you've said about the fact that, you know, your sources of food, there are really good sources of food, IGA, you know, finding, you know, the fruit and veg direct, your smaller stores. I'm all about supporting small business, because small business is actually what supports our economy realistically and in real terms. So we need to help these small businesses. Aldi's another great one as well, if that's where your budget's at. And you know, I shop at Aldi, not my fruit and veg anymore, but they still have great quality. And for many people, it's really affordable as well. Developing relationships with the people that you're buying food from, but developing relationships in all areas of your life, particularly health aspects. Develop a relationship with a health food person. You know, develop a relationship with, you know, your healthcare professionals, so they get to know you, and because then you can fight for your health. Because if you've got a relationship with that person, you'll go in there saying, no, actually, I don't, because you can be more honest in those relationships. No, I actually don't like that today. I don't want those apples. I think I want some pears. Do you know what I mean? And look at where your food is coming from.
Yeah.
God, that's so important, because, you know, I get salmon, never thought to think about where it's actually coming from and the quality that it might be. So thank you for that with me. But also, you know, looking at where our meat's coming from. Is it in a way that the animal is treated in a much better and, you know, almost like farm-like space, you know, in terms of feeding and all aspects. Check the food, you know, in season foods, because we are quite an entitled little bunch, and we almost stick to the same foods, and we forget that actually fruit and veg is seasonal. And some of our meat is seasonal as well. So the fact that we can get it all year round, you know, we need to start wiring our brains to see that's actually a problem. You know, that's actually not meant to be. Spend time cooking, preparing, learning about your food, you know, sourcing it from great places. And I absolutely, to me, I'm all for community and creating communities that support each other. But community through food is really, we don't have that anymore. And, you know, that's one of the changes that I'm making this year, is connecting with groups of people like you, and wanting to start do things like having group cooking sessions, you know, sharing and connecting over business, over life, over everything. Because you're right, when you connect as a community, whether it's a small little 5 people or it's a larger, but when you are preparing the meal together, cooking together, when you're cleaning together, there's something really powerful that takes place when that happens. And that's definitely missing from, you know, I can definitely feel it in my life that I want more of that. I'm moving towards that, and you have to take action within that. Kate, what you do is so incredibly important. And the generosity in the way that you've shared information about what you do, like I can feel that deeply, and I hope everyone watching and listening can feel that as well, because what a phenomenal human soul that you are. And I'm so grateful that you're in the world doing the work that you're doing and sharing your time with me today. It's been fucking amazing. I've got three final question for you, and I call them the final what's, the three final what's. So
Okay.
you're good to go. I don't tell anyone what I'm doing. First, I want to say thank you. What a great conversation. I mean, you've answered all my questions that I had down, but this is the point of connected conversations: is we just let it go where it needs to,
Mm.
because those listening and watching are going to take from it what they need to, because we've not put any limits on what the conversation was going to be about. Speaking from your absolute area of very deep expertise, uh, and I know people are going to take away a multitude of nuggets of absolute gold from that. So thank you. Three final what's. Kate, what is well-being to you?
Self-love.
Ooh.
Self-love.
Woo-hoo!
Taking responsibility for yourself firstly, and and really connecting with that, yeah, self-love.
Oh,
And
love
that's
it.
not in a mirror. That's I'm worthy of being well. I'm worthy of feeling the same things as other people who we look towards as being idols or whomever. Yeah, that's well-being.
Beautiful. What are your must-do daily well-being practices?
Meditation, exercise, and eating well, and good communication, like loving. Oh, okay. Most important, leave love behind.
Love it. Yeah. So, what impact does well-being have on your life?
It's changed my life. If I look at the last 2 years as being an example, so over many years I built up ritual practice of exercise, and that came in the form of swimming. And then they shut that down, and I had to start walking. And I was walking, but it wasn't the same as the swimming. And then I was also doing some weights. And so for me, it's getting back into those routines, because what it taught me was that everything I'd been preaching to people over all these years, I stopped being able to do myself, which meant I had to learn to start that again. And there was no good anyone saying to me, oh, just go and start swimming, or just start going and doing those classes. And that's getting back to the whole responsibility of our well-being. We look to external forces as our saviours. We want, and this is where well-being comes in the form of going to a doctor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist. We want quick fixes. There's no quick fix for well-being. It's lifelong. It is about ritual practice of positive behaviours, and positive behaviours are not the ones that mean that we're sort of, clouding our judgment with alcohol, drugs and bad nutrition. So instant gratification, it's about looking at the repercussions and how we can have long-lasting well-being through our actions of really practicing, for me, what I preach. I would not be able to do the work I do if I was walking into a room of people knowing that as soon as I finished work, I was going and having, sculling a drink or smoking a cigarette or taking drugs. It's like, that's why it's been such a difficult time for me, because I've had to really connect with the fact that we're not allowed to make these choices for our own well-being anymore. we've been asked to trust in the very thing that I don't trust in. And so just looking at our own impact on what we can do and what we can instigate for ourselves, and that is routine. So practice does make perfect.
Kate, loved it. From me to you, thank you for being in the world, and thank you for doing the work that you do, because you absolutely are a phenomenal human, and my soul is absolutely full to the brim spending time with you. I love that I get the feeling of I call it emotional overwhelm, but in a really beautiful way. Like, I'm so full, I can feel my little eyes watering, like in a really joyful way. So this is absolutely delicious. I'm going to put the links up to connect with Kate and to talk about your own wellbeing journey with her and food. She's got lots of stuff that she does around it. So absolutely, if that's, and I know I say if, but I know people need to connect with you. So if you're on a wellbeing journey and need to get a handle on your food and get some amazing information, then please connect with Kate. Kate, thank you so much for sharing your time in this connected conversation. It has been absolute. I don't have the words. That's how beyond. It's been absolutely amazing to connect with you. And I'm already going to put it out there, because we're going to share a meal. We're going to do some cooking together, because I owe you that.
Right, Em. I love
I'm
it.
putting that out there. We're meeting in person and I'm cooking with you. I'm such a food person. But yes, there's a lot more to talk about here. I can feel that. So thank you so much. It's been absolutely magnificent.
Thanks, Emma.
Connect with Kate through LinkedIn or Facebook, or connect with her direct through her email. To connect with me, head to emmamuir.com. Enjoy your day, and thanks for sharing your time.